Hey everyone, Eggman here with another video, and today we have a double top 16 breakdown for the One Piece card game. We had two online regionals hosted by Top Cut this weekend, one on the 25th as well as one on the 26th as well. And if you guys want any of these deck lists, they're all on my website, Eggman Events. It's going to be linked in the description of this video, both this page and and just the entire website in general. So I've been really working hard to make this website really good for just a lot of resources and everything, and you're going to find a lot of deck lists and everything from there. So second, just shout outs to Top Cut for running the event as well, and also just huge shout outs to Orange Samurai for doing all of the inputting of the deck list from the pictures into the website as well, or at least into the deck building website that were linked on mine. So I was out of town this weekend and just generally more on the road than usual, which is kind of why this video is also like a day later than I usually like to drop these deck lists. So just big thanks to him for doing all of that work. Makes it a lot easier for me. And normally I have to do that work for every one of these. So I don't think I would be able to get this video out today without him being able to do that for the deck list. So really appreciate it. Make sure to follow them on Twitter and Facebook as well. But let's get into this breakdown as it is. And the big thing you're probably already seeing is that Newgate is 7 out of 16 for both of these events, which is almost oppressive. I think approaching or pretty much is oppressive for a deck to be as popular as that, especially like consistently, right? For both these events doing super duper well, and 7 out of 16 is almost half, which is huge for something like a card game, right? So that's really interesting to see that. We did see like Newgate do really well the previous weekend for a lot of stuff, especially like, Tash got second this week and last week as well, which was really a really strong showing with Newgate as well. But I think it's just a really strong leader, and with more people kind of tuned into, the Straw Hat build is really good and really oppressive at stuff. Also, I think it has a really good matchup against green as well, at least Kinemon, which, conversely, we've been seeing Kinemon do quite well, but on both the 25th and the 26th, it only got one finish for both of these events too. So the fact that this deck can be very good against that matchup means that it kind of dictates the meta if Kinemon was one of the bigger or at least more popular leaders for a lot of these events, which we have been seeing, as well as Zoro, which I think the matchup is like 50-50, maybe a little bit on Newgate's favor. Zoro is definitely not unwinnable, and so Zoro is still in this meta. We still see him. It's the second most popular leader for both these events as well, but it's just very kind of interesting to see, again, how much Newgate has kind of developed as a very strong leader in this past couple of weeks. So we're going to go over the top placing leader for both these events. We're going to kind of split it half and half, so we're only going to cover one leader, even if it's topped in both events. With the exception of first place, we're going to look at both first place lists because it's really hard to get first place in like a 500-person event for these kind of things. So we're just going to jump on into it. So this is going to be Zheng's first place, Newgate. Both, Newgate won both of these events as well. And so looking at this, and I just do want to just go over both the first place lists, even though they're the same leader. I just want to respect both players. So, but Sheng, I would say this is a pretty standard list for what we're seeing. I first kind of learned about like a very good Straw Hat list from Nico, who I interviewed on my channel earlier last week, and this build is looking very similar to the builds that I've seen him run as well. Minor card changes like the guard point being added. I don't think he ran that card, but the 2Ks are pretty similar, and just kind of like the idea of this deck is that you just kind of just be very aggressive with it. You want to go first, which means if you see Nami, you get to find some pieces, which is really nice. You're able to find like a Luffy, you're able to establish that on board. The fact that Newgate is such a strong card for not only like pressure, but also like defense as well. And being able to play this on curve and this leader does feel very good a lot of the time. And in general, you're also really consistent since you're drawing more cards more often. You're less likely to brick. You can still do it, but it's just less likely in a leader like this. And 6K just means a lot. The fact that this leader has like Zoro, who's really good at making 5K bodies, has to kind of invest into something more to be able to get into there is kind of important. As well as I think that, against green, again, like green, you can just punch their face every turn, and they're kind of going to get worried because most of the thing that they want to do early game is to kind of establish a board. And if you just decide not to make a board, then what are they doing, right? Like it's kind of hard for them to actually do anything about it. So I think that's something as well. I think why Newgate has been doing so well, because Kinemon was very popular, and if you have a deck that's beating one of the most popular, and again doing very well against the other one, Zoro. I think it's not very surprising to see why it's been doing super well. So this is Sheng's list, and then also we do have on the 26th. This is Ryan's list too, and this one's a different than more than most of the ones I've seen as well. It is still the Straw Hat build, I would say, and it still doesn't have Moby Dick as well, which is why I would say it's Straw Hat. But a couple more texts, just doing more of the Whitebeard cards specifically. We have Marco. Marco is honestly a really strong card. The fact that it just never gets out of your hand is great. The fact that it's a blocker, 5k, and even if they try to get rid of it, as long as you have 2 or less life, you can just ditch a Whitebeard card from your hand, which can include like a Newgate that's kind of dead in your hand maybe, or like an ace or something like that. So just being able to have like a constant body on board, I think, is good for what it is. And having a blocker isn't too bad either, and it's a 1k, so that's really strong. You still have your vanillas. They aren't the Straw Hat ones, but that's fine. Just because of you're finding like more value on the Marco than necessarily the searchability off the Nami. And then also the Jozu. And I've been tempted in running this card in my builds too, just because it is still a 2k counter, and then also the fact that you're able to rush with it if you just have a Dawn underneath it, which you always will because you want to make it 5k. So just being able to have like another card that's rush but also not like dead in hand, I think is really, really good too. So very strong card, and I think that I think like this still should maybe have like a 1 or 2 of in like regular builds in general, just because of the flexibility of it. It's maybe it's a trap, but it just feels like it's flexible enough to be a really good card in that spot too. So congrats to Ryan on their finish there. And then jumping on over to our 4th place Zoro list over here. So this is Justin Tang's 4th place Zoro from the 25th, and this is, I would say, a more like most Zoro lists, I think, run 40 cards the same a lot of the time. There are some choices and some ratio choices, specifically like Magra. Not everyone's running this, and you're only running one of it here, and a couple other things like Radical Beam's kind of a weird, not a standard card, and Gum Gum Red Hawk too. I always fall into the trap with this card with Zoro. Like, I never, why would they be playing this card? This is really defensive. Zoro is not a defensive leader in any way. So, being able to, get hit by this is kind of stinky sometimes if you really let yourself up to it. And sometimes you don't have any choice but having to play into it with how your board is. So, that's, really good at, getting rid of, 1-drop blockers and being defensive, which is really nice. And then just all the other advantage you kind of get with the rest of this deck too. So I don't have much more to say. I think Zoro is still very strong, very straightforward for what it is. Doesn't mean the gameplay is straightforward, but I think the deck building is kind of understood on a lot of ways. So congrats again to Justin on their finish there. And then next up we do have Alan Gee, who got 5th place on the 26th and then 6th place on the 25th, if that's not confusing. Both with Luffy. Tiny change between the two decks. The 26th one, where he got 5th place, he added a Luffy and took out a Brook, and that was the one difference between the two of them. So 48 cards the same between the two of them, and I think I still like Luffy. I will still contest Zoro is the better leader in this meta, even though I was such a Luffy fanboy in set 1. But I do think that he can potentially have a better matchup against Whitebeard if needed, specifically just because you are just a little bit better at making taller attacks, which is a little bit more important than going wide and having a lot of these 1k attacks too. So I think that's something that's impactful and that could see Luffy seeing a little bit more play, or at least a little bit more success in the next couple weeks if Whitebeard continues to be as popular as he has been. I also still think the 9-drop Whitebeard is really good in Luffy, especially since you can play him 1, and then if you can play another one, you can still do the Dawn -2 underneath the first one and get the 1 attacking skill, which is great as well. So, but obviously this looks a lot like the Zoro list, but being able to be so flexible with your Dawn and the management with it there, I think is great as well. And Nico Robin's still a really great card. Vista's a really great card in this leader, and you just get to do a lot of pressure and sometimes just make taller attacks, and it kind of works out there too. So happy again to see that Luffy got in both, and congrats again to Alan for bringing my boy into these top 16s and for your 2 invites into the nationals. So big congrats there as well. Next up we do have Chris Stock's 6th place, so he got 6th place on the 26th event here with Emporio. And Emporio is such an interesting deck in a lot of ways, and this build is a little bit different than what I normally see. The absences that I normally see is Perona. I normally see the 1-drop, or at least the 3-drop Donquixote Doflamingo. just because it's a blocker and you can use it to kind of set up your top 5 cards in life of just being able to draw a card or being able to kind of set up for like an Emporio turn on like the next turn or something like that. All that's really, really strong for what it is, but they're just absent in this deck, which I think is really interesting. And honestly, if you'll see, like this deck just has a lot of 2Ks. I think like pretty much most, if not all of the 2Ks this deck can run, like blue can run. Like we have Alvida, we have Mr. 2, both of them, and then we also have Draco Mihawk as well. There might be a couple more plus 2Ks, but by and large, a lot of them, which is really interesting to see. And trying to probably guarantee you get like a lot of counter power out of the 2 cards you get at the end of your turn with your leader. Also, 2 new combo land. I really want to run this card more than 2, but like it stinks after you find the first one. But man, it's really good at setting up a lot of your plays and stuff. So I have just like a really big mixed feeling with it, but 2's fine. 2's probably the minimum I would run, but I think you have to at least run the 2 because it's such a really good like turn 1 play to just set you up and help you get some cycle and just finding that consistency there too. And then also 4 Dracula Mihawks is such a power play here too. It does get rid of a lot of stuff, and if you blue really wants to just make a big board where you can just start swinging one at a time. And that just means that this Dracula Mihawk gets a lot of advantage if played at the right time. It does think that sometimes it's just stuck in your hand too with how kind of Emporio works. And sometimes like you want to play him, but that means you also don't get to keep a lot of the other. You have to keep the rest of your cards in your hand, which means you don't get the draw to at the end of the turn either. But I think he's really strong at what he is, and I'm happy to see that we're able to get an Emporio in this top 16 too. So congrats to Chris on their top 6 finish there. Next up, we have Thomas Nguyen's 7th place Trafalgar Law for the 25th regional, and this is definitely a leader that I've been liking more and more as the meta develops. It's a really hard leader to kind of get right the first time of a meta, just because it is really reactive, and you have like that deck space and the color diversity to choose cards that really kind of counter and fit to what the meta is really calling for. But I do like a lot of the choices here. Like, again, like Curly Dedan is definitely like something that just makes this deck so much better in so many ways. Being able to find like some 1-drops, which can include the Nami, which can then find something else like a Chopper or something like this can just like draw you 2 cards with the Nami as well. And that's just really great when you need to go wide on a board to be able to start using your bounce effects as well. So this is honestly really similar to a build that I've been running a lot. And the fact like both the Trafalgar Laws are fantastic for this deck too. Being able to get the restand with this guy means that even if you like, you can just attack with this guy if he's already on the board, give it a lot of dawn or whatever, and then use your leader effect to play the 5-drop to just restand it. You can even attack with it again if you're not worried about anything happening to it, or you can just reestablish your block if you want to. And then this is a 6K. It's also 1K counter, which is fantastic for what it is. And Zoro is also probably another target, or even if itself, if you have it on the board for like last turn or something. But a really, really strong kind of way to push a lot of damage and get more of an end condition. I think that's really favorable too. So the game is a little bit slower. Zoro is kind of an exception, but you do have a lot of ways to interact with that deck too. Vista's a really good card, as well as just all of your ways to kind of have blockers, which are kind of annoying to get rid of and interact with too. So I think this deck is in a good spot. You do have to be kind of reactive to what your opponent's doing, and this is always a deck that you have to just adapt to your opponent in the first place. But man, it does feel good. You do get like a lot of cycle and a lot of rotation, and it just feels really good in a lot of ways. So congrats to Thomas for their finish there. And then next up, we do have Zaya, Oshana with their Kinemon, again, one of the 2, and also a viewer on the channel as well. So just shout outs to Zaya for this. He messaged me on Facebook like, yeah, I got my prizing from your stuff, but also I got top 8 with this. So really, really happy to see him succeed with that. And Kinemon's been one of my favorite leaders, but as I said this a couple weeks ago, I think as the meta goes, it's going to be less and less popular in what a lot of people are playing, specifically because there is a good way to play around this deck, and kind of once you see what you're doing, and it's really easy, like especially in the beginning of this format, to play into what this deck wants you to be doing, and you get like a bunch of free value just because of that, right? So when people are kind of figuring out how this leader works and how to play around it, and like Newgate again is just like, what if I just keep hitting their face? What are they going to do about it? And sometimes it's like nothing. They can't do anything about it. So I think it's something that people will be less and less inclined to play this leader, and I think people are going to be going back to Eustass Kid. Honestly, that's still my prediction. We'll see if that's right. We're going to talk about Eustass Kid in a little bit too, but there are still a lot of great things that this deck does. The fact that you do get like a really, really strong way to do some early game board control is unrivaled compared to what this deck can do with your Okikus and with your Yamatos and everything else. And then that just means you get enough time to just spend a turn to just drop the 8-drop Odin and just kind of go from there, right? If that works out, then you have like an 8K that you swing with twice every turn, and everything else you have for this deck too. So it is really great. But if your opponent is more aggressive and you're not able to get that board control, like sometimes you have a hard time with Zoro just being as fast as it is. This deck is kind of bricky, right? There's a lot of cards without any counter cost, like the Trafalgar Law, both of the Kid and the Odin. You're running 4 event cards too, which needs Dawn open to be able to use their effects. And you have your 4 Yamatos and your 4 Okikus too. Like, there's just a lot of cards that are going to be dead in your hand a lot of the time during this match. And then if they just try to do like a bunch of 5K attacks, you run out of cards very, very quickly to help get out of that. So that's my issue with Kinemon right now. I think it's still a very strong deck, but I think it's definitely going to be waning in the next couple weeks, and we're going to have to see if that's true or not. So congrats again to Zaya for their finish there. And then next up we have Sage with the 10th place Donquixote Doflamingo from the 26th event. And we do get a couple cards of support in this deck in general. We do have the new 1-drop, which is by and large I think is like a slightly worse Perona, but it does have some benefits. So it only looks top 3. You get to return them top or bottom in any order. It doesn't have counter costs, which I get why they don't have counter costs, but it feels like I don't think this card would have been broken if it was a counter plus 1K. But it does also have like Dawn times 1 when attacking. Trash 1 card from your hand. Place it to one of your opponent's characters with cost of 1 or less to the bottom of their deck. So that kind of happens every once in a while. Especially if you're playing against like Zoro, aggro, and they just kind of keeping their ones up. You can play this card like your turn 1, and then turn 2 you can use the Dawn times 1 and attacking to get that interaction there. So there are reasons to run it, and there are some nice things. Perona's still I think better by and large, but it's kind of what it is. But I do like the fact that you do have another way to help guarantee that if you go first, you play this card or Perona, look at the top couple of cards of your deck and just guarantee that turn 2, you're able to just use your leader effect with 2 Dawn, get a 7K attack, and then get to draw a card by playing your card for free. I think is really, really strong. So I think that's in a good spot for us. And in general, Donquixote Doflamingo is in a better spot. I think he does have a little bit of support, which is really nice. And then we do have like just a couple more targets for it. So we have Jinbei, which does have a really great on KO effect. Plays up to one of your characters, opponent, up to one character with cost of 3 or less, the bottom of its owner's deck. It can be yours, but most likely you want to use one of your opponents. Unless you're like in a deck out situation, but whatever. I think Jinbei is very strong there. Just having that on KO just means that your opponents have to sequence around some stuff, which is nice. And then just Gecko Moria, it's a 6K, which you can play off your leader for free, which is honestly very good. Like, I think honestly I would maybe bump this up to 3 copies, because then your opponent's going to have to like invest some time and effort to get rid of this, and if they don't, then you have this 6K being able to attack every turn. That really pays off the cost of it very, very quickly too. So I think it's something to consider. I think it's a good card actually. Even if it's just vanilla, it is big enough that your opponent's going to have some issues kind of getting rid of it, and they're going to just lose like resources. Like, unless you're playing against Newgate, they're going to have to spend some good amount of time and effort just to even to pressure this card, which is kind of nice. So other than that, I think the deck is solid for what it is. Again, Kuma is a good card too. Boa Hancock is great, and just everything else. It's a really neat list, and I'm happy that it did well. So congrats to Sage for their finish there. And then next up we have Robert Hudson with Eustass Kid, which did get 13th place on the 26th regional. And we're going to transition to this because I was kind of talking about this a little bit in Kinemon, is that this deck is still generically just a powerhouse in so many ways. The fact that you are able to swing twice with this leader by itself means it's very, very easy for you to just pressure down something like Edward Newgate, right? Because a lot of these Edward Newgates are doing a lot of these, big swings and stuff, but like, worst case, like, you can still do your big thing where you are 2 13K swings with this leader. If you get your opponent down to 0 life as Newgate, which is again very easy to do, they just won't be able to get rid out of your double leader swing a lot of the time. A lot of them aren't running blockers and just that kind of interaction. And since Kid can just be kind of aggressive by itself too, I think it's just it's something that I think more and more people are going to be leaning towards and trying out and kind of going back to Kid after they're just like, I really do like Kinemon, but missing out that twice attack with my leader is probably too strong to kind of give up on some of this. So that's my prediction. We'll see if that's true or not, but Kid is still very strong, and this list is just pretty much the same. You're also able to be a little bit greedier with your no counter cards because you do have a reason to use them with the discard from your leader effect too, so that's kind of nice. But you can still play Odin in this list, which is nice. You can still play Yamato in this list too, which is still a very, very good card for the timing you get to play it. And then just a bunch of 2Ks and just, I mean, Basil Hawkins is so great. It's not good, I'd say, against like Newgate specifically, unless they have like a bunch of their 6K vanillas that you want to try to pressure and stuff. But I don't know. I think this deck is good. And I think we'll see if more and more of the uses kids pop up in the next couple weeks, or if I'm just wrong. We'll have to kind of find out. But congrats again to Robert on their finish there. And to wrap it on up, we do have our last deck of the day. This is Vicent Chang's 15th place Smoker for the March 26th regional. And Smoker's in a really interesting spot. We don't really see, we see like Black get some occasional tops for it. It's definitely not like in a really, really bad spot. It's just like a little bit undertuned, and it's kind of like understood, especially since the card pool for Black is a lot less than any other color right now, just inherently because it's the newer color, right? And it came out of this set, but it still has some of the best removal in the game. And the biggest thing is that you just have to make sure you sequence everything correctly. And that's like the hardest thing I think about this deck, is that it's very easy for you not to find your pieces at the right time or find the wrong pieces at the wrong time, and just not really be able to get the efficient plays that you're really, really looking for. So that's something I think that's holding this deck back a little bit. Just the fact that it's only Kuzan, right? Or your only 6-drop is a Sakazuki, right? There's not like a 2 of something else that you could get the half and half split with, right? So I think that's the consistency is the only issue with it a little bit. I do like the ad. So he was running 4 of the Great Eruption, which is not a standard card for this. It is from the star deck, but most people just run the Meteor Volcano and kind of just be done with it. But I do like the idea of this. You get to draw a card, then give up to one of your opponent's characters -2 cost during this turn. A cycle for 1 is not too bad for this deck too. And also I think like 4 Kuzans is really interesting. I think that's a little bit much for what this deck is kind of doing right now. I would probably go down to like 3, especially if I'm running Great Eruption to get some more cycle. I probably would go down to 3 with this card, because more times than not, this card just gets kind of stuck in my hand, and then I play 1, but I can't play anymore, and I have to discard. I mean, I get to discard them with my leader effect, or not leader effect, but like with a Sakazuki effect or something like that. But I don't know. I think this is maybe a little bit too much, but I don't know. We'll see if Vicent sees this and has any opinions on it. But I like Smoker a lot. I think he's very fun. I wish he's a little bit more consistent, but he does have some good matchups at times, and he never, none of the matchups I feel like are unwinnable. It's just like a little bit, it just reminds me like more of like how Kaido was last format. Maybe not as oppressive, but like the same thing. Like sequencing is really important, but you have the potential to get everything you need to react to what your opponent's doing and answer it. And I think that's really cool as well. So congrats again to Vicent for their finish there. And that is going to be the end of this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, if you want to see any of these deck lists, they're going to be on my website, Eggman Events, which is going to be linked in the description below. Again, thank you to Topcut for running the event, as well as Orange Samurai for doing the deck list, and that is going to be it for me. So again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.